So as we're now in October, the month of horror, it seems like a perfect time to return to the Cthulhu Mythos, and we do that today with the Deep Ones, a set of creatures that some of you may be familiar with, and others may just know as those weird fish people. As of right now, most of what we've covered on this channel regarding the works of Lovecraft has centered around the deities of the mythos, the cosmic entities that we cannot comprehend nor understand, but the Deep Ones are somewhat easier to explain. With that being said, easier certainly doesn't mean easy. Those of you who have read the works of Lovecraft will know at times it can be more than confusing. So what exactly are they? The Deep Ones can be broken down to and described as amphibian-like humanoids that dwell in the very depths of the ocean. Considering the very loose canon of the Cthulhu Mythos, they don't seem to have a set-in-stone appearance or form, but they are often described as having a mixture of human, fish, and amphibian traits. Their skin is often somewhere between a dark green and a light grey colour. Their bellies are white, and they have this noticeable gloss to them, suggesting that a physical altercation may be quite difficult because of how slippery their skin is. The fish aspect of the Deep Ones is very apparent when we look at their head, because it is basically the head of a fish. We see an array of gills located around their neck, and they have these large globular eyes that in most cases don't have eyelids, making them incapable of blinking. They also have webbed hands and feet, and their backs are lined with fins and scales. Despite the fact that they do actually have legs, their movement rarely resembles that of a human. They instead move on all fours and at times hop around like a frog. A man-eating carnivorous frog, that is. The Deep Ones made their first appearance in Lovecraft's 1931 novella, The Shadow of Innsmouth, which was then later published in 1936, and to this day it remains the only piece of Lovecraft's work that was published in a traditional book form during his lifetime. The story itself takes place in the fictional location of Innsmouth, a deserted fishing town. We very quickly learn that those in the town have quite a weird look to them, and they're definitely not the most welcoming to strangers, with several going missing, including those sent by the government to investigate the inner dealings of the town. When the narrator of the story and our protagonist, Robert Olmsted, travels to the town, he comes across a local merchant by the name of Obed Marsh, who discovered this race of fish-like humanoids. Marsh then took it upon himself to create a cult known as the Esoteric Order of Dagon. This cult, like many in Lovecraft's work, would partake in human sacrifice, and in exchange the Deep Ones would ensure that their fishing hauls were very lucrative, even gifting the people of the town jewellery from the depths of the ocean. Obed Marsh and his cult would eventually be arrested, and the human sacrifice then stopped, but the Deep Ones, angered, then attacked the town, killing over half of its population. The only way the survivors could guarantee their safety was by continuing Obed's practices. The people of Innsmouth were then forced to breed with the Deep Ones, creating these rather odd hybrid creatures that resembled humans early on, but as they aged, they slowly transformed into Deep Ones. They would eventually leave the surface and live in the undersea cities. So it now makes sense why the people of Innsmouth seemed so odd to the narrator, why they looked and walked so strangely, because most of them were going through the transformation of becoming a Deep One. With our narrator Robert now knowing too much, it's no longer safe in the town, and as he tries to escape, the entire town begin their search for him. After a brief encounter with some of the creatures, Robert was able to flee, and as the years passed, he began to research his own family bloodline. To Robert's shock, he discovers that he is a descendant of Obed Marsh, and this entire time he himself was going through the transformation process of becoming a Deep One. Robert eventually comes to terms with his situation and travels to the Deep One's city beneath the sea, where he would live for eternity. So now we've gone over the main crux of the story, there are a few things to discuss and mention. The Deep Ones are immortal, meaning they cannot die of old age and decay, but they can still however be killed. So if the Deep Ones are immortal, then why are they breeding with humans? We may not know their final plan and endgame, but the Deep Ones aren't the same as the cosmic entities described by Lovecraft. If we break them down, they're essentially an alien species, a group of intelligent frog people, so we can attempt to understand their motives and desires. We know that they want to take over the surface, so perhaps breeding with humans is another way to increase their numbers on the surface, while destabilizing our own population at the same time. It's also worth considering that part of the cult's sacrifice may not have been a blood offering, but maybe just an offering of men and women to the Deep Ones. If you have another species giving you their people in exchange for fish and jewellery, then perhaps using them to breed is the most useful way they can be used. There is some debate as to how these hybrids are conceived, with many believing that all hybrids come from a female Deep One and a male human. The theory behind this is that female Deep Ones and male humans possess the limiting growth gene of their species, which prevents the hybrid Deep Ones from growing at a faster rate than the regular Deep Ones, which leaves us wondering what type of monster could be created from a female human and a male Deep One. With all of that said, we can now discuss the transformation process of a hybrid in some more detail. In their early life we've already mentioned that they resembled a human, and at this stage they are not immortal, so dying of natural causes before the transformation is complete is entirely possible. Later in life their ears begin to shrink until they are almost entirely non-existent. In some cases they just completely disappear. Their eyes begin to bulge and almost burst from their sockets, no longer needing to blink. They begin to lose all of their hair, and their heads begin to narrow. Webbing starts to form between their fingers, and their skin becomes rubbery, changing colour. Gills are developed from the folds in their neck, and their voices become croaky. The actual rate in which one transforms varies from person to person, so there is no set period for this transformation process. Once they have transformed, however, it takes some time before they are able to live underwater, so they go into isolation until they are ready. They eventually abandon the human world and journey to one of the many undersea cities. The Deep Ones may not be on the same level as the deities of the Cthulhu Mythos, but they have been said to do their bidding. The cult in Lovecraft's story was called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Dagon himself is often described as an enormous Deep One, and he was revered amongst the Deep Ones as their deity. It's believed that all Deep Ones continue to grow even once they've reached maturity, as long as they have a steady diet. So perhaps if enough time passes, the Deep Ones will be large enough to take over the surface. The Great Dreamer Cthulhu was also amongst the deities that the Deep Ones were said to follow. In the later stories, they were even said to be amongst the species that protected his daughter, Cthulhu. So maybe this association reflects their desire to see the sunken city of Earlier once again rise. I know a lot of people have been asking when I was going to return to the Cthulhu Mythos, and with it being October, most of this month's uploads will be horror and Halloween related. There will be some more videos on Lovecraft's work along with some classic horror. We also have some original horror stories that we've written to give you an idea of the quality of writing that will be in the book, which will have its own trailer up pretty soon. If you have enjoyed this video and there's any areas of Lovecraft's work that you'd like to see me cover, then please let me know in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.